Be comfortable and grateful, but take things one at a time. Master one mistake first. I think the Greetings, one and all. Welcome to another episode of the Beyond Fluency podcast. I'm Liam and I'm joined today by my good friend. Hey,
Rams, how's it?
Rams. I'm good, buddy. How are you?
I'm well, man.
Yeah, we had a good conversation today talking about perfectionism and the effects of perfectionism on language learning. What else did we cover?
We also covered the roots of perfectionism in general,
Yeah.
and specifically, we went into details of the roots of perfectionism in language learning.
Yes, we looked at how to overcome perfectionism and practical things that you can do. So, hope you enjoy today's chin wag and look forward to hearing what you think about it in the comments below.
One thing that I'm doing now that I'm trying to learn is to try to find a balance between what I've identified and things I'd like to improve and things that I'm already good at.
Right.
Because one thing I've realized with myself as well as my friends who are into personal development is that we do spend a significant amount of time focusing on what we need to do better. And I use the word focus there because where our attention is what we will focus on. So
Right.
in order to create a bit more balance, I'm trying to also observe the things that I'm good at. Because if you ask me now, from a language point of view, what things do I think I'm good at when it comes to language learning? I will struggle. But if you ask me what things I think I'm bad at, I think I'll be able to give you a longer list. And I think that is something that a lot of people can apply to, can relate to.
Well, it's an interesting
This,
point. A part of the human condition is to focus on the negative, right? If you think about compliments as an example of that, as human beings, for every negative comment, whether that's from somebody else or to ourselves, we need five positive comments to balance that out. So the fact that our brain focuses on the negative is very much a unconscious response.
I think that's such an interesting fact. It's a great thing to know. One, I think it leads to a little bit better awareness and maybe even understanding of why it is maybe sometimes you behaved in a certain way if you look back. And in the relation to language, I think it's great to know that as well, because being armed with that information, if you've been told off about your language skills before, or being told that you're not good in this particular language, we speak about that as well. The
Hmm.
last time we saw each other, right? The
Hmm.
stories we tell ourselves, being aware that it's normal to look at the negative, it kind of helps. The reason why I wanted us to chat a little bit about this today is because I think that sometimes on our quest, if you will, on our quest of achieving whatever we want to, we lose track and sight of other important things along the way,
Hmm.
and it can lead to a bit of burnout.
There's a
I'm
fine
trying.
line between being ambitious and being a perfectionist. Perfectionism is a behavior. It's something that we've learned. We're not born perfectionists. We learn perfectionism. It is for some people, it's a coping mechanism. For others, it's deeper than that. There's always an underlying thing about it. I mean, we've got procrastination, perfectionism, and being in a hurry. And they can all drive each other to a certain extent. It depends what's going on. You know, some people are perfectionist about one thing, but then not about other things. Some people are perfectionists about everything. Yeah. So it really depends on the situation for each person. I think in terms of language, as I understand it, it comes down to what your experience of learning languages has been like often in school.
Yes.
We talked before. Your experience of learning a second or third language is very different to mine because yours was lived experience. Mine
Yeah.
was in an academic way. And I think in terms of perfectionism with language, anyway, it comes down to what academic experience you have. How were you taught? What were the expectations? And not just what were the expectations of learning a second language, but what were the expectations of you learning your own language at school? How did that work out for you? Because if you're taught in a way that supports curiosity and interest, you will then apply that to other things that you learn. If you're taught in a way that demands perfectionism with grammatical structures, that's what you will expect for doing it in another language, whether it's important or not.
Hello, beautiful people. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Let's get back to the good stuff. So, the very first experience, one of the few first experiences I had was working in a school here in Italy. Um, and it was a middle school. So, I think from 7 to 10, 11 years old. And I saw something that till today, this, by the way, was 2016, so quite a while back, but I still remember it like it was yesterday. One of the teachers, she had a 8-year old, so that would be grade two,
Mm-hmm.
and she was the Italian teacher. She taught them Italian, and she had prepared a test for the kids, and the test was irregular verbs in Italian. So she literally, as a preparation for the test, she gave them a page, perhaps with 24 or 26 irregular verbs on it. And I don't know, maybe the test was going to be test out of 10 or 15. But that
Mm-hmm.
was literally the test. The test was not on their ability to use the language. The test was on their ability to memorize.
Right.
And so now that you say it, I look at it at my clients, and I've found myself in several instances where I've said to a client, like, look, this is a language, it is not mathematics. There is no black and white answer in this particular case. We can take a word like get, for example, right? Get has 11 dictionary definitions. Now, I use it in context with a client, and they didn't understand the use of get in that particular instance. So I explain, okay, in this case, get means understand. And they'll say to me, oh, wow. So get means understand. I say, yes, get means understand. And it means buy. And it means take. And it means bring. And it
Receive.
means receive.
Mm-hmm.
And kept going and going. And they're like, oh, and they're trying to write down the whole thing. I'm like, okay, man, I'm not gonna tell you how to learn because only you know that, or at least I hope that you've got to the point where you know how you learn. But I often say to them, but why are you trying to memorize it? Why are you trying to use it? But now that you've mentioned this, it kind of makes sense now why maybe the approach of language learning may be the way it is. And you also pointed out another one, academic as well. Although I must say, I'm still, I think I'm in that phase where I'm a bit skeptical. I still think that a lot of the times we use perfectionism, or I'm a perfectionist, where we just really mean, I need to get this done quickly to refer
I'm
to
not
the other.
I'm not disagreeing with you in the sense that I do when I work with perfectionists, I do see this type of behavior. I'm not sure
There's a
I'm
there's
not
a
sure
link.
what the link is. Yeah.
Perfectionism, I think, kind of implies that if there's difficulty, a struggle, we get angry. We want to be able to get it quickly. So hence the rush.
Hmm.
you know the I don't have time. You've got those clients. I don't have time to struggle with English. I need to be good at this now. I need to be
Right.
perfect at it now. So maybe that I'm seeing the link between perfectionism and being in a rush in that context, where someone is trying to achieve something that is highly improbable within a short space of time and expect it to work out perfectly as they envisioned it in their mind. And
Right.
perhaps this is where I'm getting the two
There's no room for
words.
obstacles.
There's no rooms for obstacles.
Right.
Everything has to be perfect. The
Hmm.
session has to be perfect.
Yeah.
The conversation has to be perfect. The things that you send them has to be perfect.
Right. Yeah. If something happens that wasn't in that exact picture that they had in their mind, everything is ruined. It's impossible to continue. The ability to be flexible and react to the obstacles and change path is very difficult for them. And I think, especially with language, there are always obstacles. Judging by the experience that I have with people who are perfectionists, that there is always an element of overachieving, potentially overachieving at a young age, and therefore taking on more and more
Oh
and
yeah.
overwhelming themselves. Question of the day for you guys. What are your personal challenges with perfectionism and what are you doing to overcome them? Leave a comment below with your experiences and let's get a conversation going.
What would you say is an overachiever in case someone didn't really understand the word?
An overachiever is someone who does more than expected of them, who achieves goals faster, younger, earlier than other people.
Yeah. The analogy that I always use when I explain this to my clients, I say an overachiever is that guy or girl at school that was great academically and was good in something sporty and was good in art. Everything that they do, they're good at.
But
And so they just don't know what it's like not to be good at something. And there comes in the perfectionism.
right, I
Because in
I should
everything
be good
else,
at everything because I always
exactly.
have been. Yes.
Exactly. And it leads to a lot of frustration. Um, and you see it even when you're speaking with them. They just, another thing that I think we could actually speak a lot more about, especially in language learning, is failure.
Mm,
In learning a new language, failure is something you should expect. Failure to understand something on the first attempt, failure to understand what you've read from the first attempt, failure to be able to use this particular structure or language in a specific way.
mm,
I think, you point out up how differently we learn languages. My superpower of learning a language, I have two, right? And I that like the frog sandwich, I believe. Try to identify your superpower when learning language. My superpower in learning language is one of two, like two things. One, I never try to understand anything. When I learn a new language, understanding is the last thing on my mind. And I've mentioned this before, and I believe it's
mm,
a superpower, right?
hmm.
Because it takes away the anxiety and the pressure of having to understand on myself,
Right.
right? Not on the other person. And then my second superpower is that I don't think I'm very intelligent. So I automatically think that things will take me longer than most people.
Right.
It's the two best superpowers you can have.
Mm.
Wait, for me anyway. Don't seek
Not
to
th
understand immediately.
not thinking you're intelligent is a limiting belief, don't you think?
Uh, I would
You're taking a limited belief and you're using it as a positive, but it's still you're limiting yourself as to what you're capable of.
well, there's a good argument to be made there. Or I would rather say it keeps me humble. It's my humbling thing,
Mm,
you know,
okay.
which is great for learning anything. I don't
It's
think
true. It's
yeah,
the beginner's mind, they call it.
yeah,
Yeah. Approaching anything, any situation from the point of view of I don't know anything about this. It creates curiosity, and allows you to be open to the process.
yeah,
There's no I should know this or I should be good at this. There's no expectation if you have a
no,
beginner's mind.
yeah. That's why it's easy for me to repeat a chapter two times.
Hmm.
That's why it's easy for me to read the same thing over and over again. That's why it's easy for me to listen to the podcast seven, eight times if I need to.
Right.
I won't listen to it seven times in a row, obviously. But those two things, those are my superpowers, man.
Mm.
Have you identified yours in terms of language learning?
In terms of language learning, I don't know actually.
I'd say take some time, think about it.
Mm.
That's my center when I get frustrated with learning language. I go back to that, like, doesn't matter that I don't understand. I understand the sound of the language. Well done, Rams. Good. Now you can identify Swahili. Now you can
Mm.
identify Mandarin, whatever. And then
Mm.
second thing is like, dude, it should take you a bit more time.
I'm the opposite. I I knew that I was smart. I just wasn't interested.
You weren't applying yourself.
I'm
Yeah.
just not applying myself because this is boring or it's not.
Coasting.
Yeah.
What about someone who would love to improve, would love to get better, uh, purely for professional reasons, not necessarily in love with the language, and simultaneously isn't in a position to pay for coaching sessions, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
How
I
do
mean,
we, how do
safety
we,
is key. They have to have rapport with themselves. They have to build that relationship. with themselves to feel comfortable with sharing and making mistakes. If you're in a moment where you are anxious about that, learn to breathe. If you're actually in a conversation, you can still, before answering, take a big deep breath, hold it for a second, and then let it out, and then continue. That is still going to help regulate the physiological reaction to the stress of the situation. If you're preparing for a meeting where you are starting to feel anxious, you can spend a couple of minutes taking deep breaths. One technique that's really useful for this is called box breathing. Take a breath in for 4 seconds, hold it for 4 seconds, let it out for 4 seconds, and then hold it for 4 seconds. And you do this, you create a box with your breath. Everything is equal. You do that for a couple of minutes, it will completely regulate your nervous system and put you back into a state of relaxation. Every time you have a big meeting or something that you're nervous about in terms of your language, use that technique and you'll feel calmer afterwards. If you then add into that, regulating your mindset to remember it's okay to make mistakes. I'm going to make mistakes. Get comfortable with saying that to yourself. I'm going to make mistakes, and that's okay. Every morning you wake up, say that to yourself. I'm going to make mistakes, and that's okay. I'm
That's
going
why I
to
was
make
speaking about
mistakes, and that's okay. Is
focus.
key to overcoming the mindset of perfectionism, which is everything has to be exactly right. We don't
Which
live
is
in that
why
kind of world.
mistakes are proof that you are learning,
Mm,
especially with language learning. Now, I'm not going to say that's a blanket statement that you can apply to everything, but when it comes to language learning, a mistake is proof that you're learning. You're receiving new information, provided, of course, that you get corrected on the mistake you made. And of course, this is now more for people who are in the position to speak with us and
hmm
can have coaching sessions. And for the people who aren't able yet to have a coaching sessions or what have you, and have to do in all of these things on their own, just remember that every time you identify a mistake or you find a mistake, that's your proof
mm.
that you've learned
And
something.
it's not your fault. We live in a society where failure and mistakes have been villainized. They've been we are told and have been told for many years now that making mistakes is bad. Failing is bad. It's not. That's how we learn. If you look at all of the most successful entrepreneurs in the world and you look at how many businesses they've had that failed, they have more failures than they have successes. It's just that they learn so much from the failures that the successes become bigger successes and therefore outweigh the losses.
You'll hear this a lot in sport as well.
Mm,
I think sport, in the world that we live in now, perhaps sport is the only place that kind of uh, allows for mistakes to a certain degree. You know, if the mistake leads to your team conceding a try or a goal and that changes the whole landscape of the match 2 3 minutes before the end, yeah, people are not happy about that mistake. But when you speak to the managers, when you speak to the players, especially after a moment of triumph, they'll always say, oh, well, and if there was a mistake before, they will say, well, we messed up here, but we realized, and then boom, and then we fixed that mistake. So I
mhm.
think, yeah, sport does kind of lend itself to celebrating mistakes, provided you learn from it. Right.
Yes, and that's the
Yeah.
important thing. Sometimes you win, sometimes you learn. But if you keep making the same mistakes, life is trying to tell you something, right? And it's the same with language. If you keep making the same language mistakes, but you don't go back and review that thing that you know you need to review, you're going to keep making the same mistake. It's going to continue the cycle of behavior. So often you know what your mistakes are. Make the time to review it, to learn it, to understand it, to practice it until you get it, and then move on to another mistake. Don't try and fix everything at the same time. Do one thing at a time.
And please, God, the only looking into the grammar rules and studying the grammar rule of that particular mistake you're making is not the only way to fix the mistake,
Mm,
because that I've noticed is the go-to for many people. I'm a lot more for application rather than theory. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So, especially when it comes to language learning, and especially with the clients that we work with,
Mm-hmm.
because the people we work with have spent the entire high schooling lives and primary school lives studying the theory of language, aka grammar.
Mm-hmm.
So they don't need to study it any further. They need to apply it. They
Yeah.
can refer back to it to understand why it's a mistake,
Mm-hmm.
right? But don't go to grammar as the place to correct your mistakes as such. You can go there to understand, but take it a step further and see how it's used in context. You can use AI in that sense.
Mm.
Okay, I've learned a new phrase, this phrase. Okay, in what context would this phrase be used? You've got to connect the grammar rules for the people who like to refer to grammar. They are just rules.
Yeah.
You need to connect the grammar structures to actual real life conversations and situations.
Yeah.
Okay. Um,
And you can use tools to be able to tell you that. Ah, I I keep making mistakes with present perfect because I'm not sure when to use it. Okay, AI, tell me in what situations am I most likely to use present perfect? Oh, these are the
yeah,
situations. Okay, so now I know that in those situations I'm probably going to have to use it. As long as I know how to use it, then I can apply it to those situations.
be grateful every time you make a mistakes because from B2 upwards, the mistakes are far in between and wide, right?
Hmm.
So
Yeah,
be
and,
grateful
and
for
and
those
like I
mistakes.
say, be comfortable and grateful, but take things one at a time. Master one mistake first. I think the the avoidance of the perfectionism comes from identifying too many things to work on at the same time. Take one at a time.
And being in a rush to complete them all.
Boom. Full circle. There we go.
Aye.
Yay. Da, 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 da,
So
da.
proud of ourselves. Liam, my friend, is always an absolute pleasure to have a conversation with you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's
And
been good. It's been good. I hope you've got something from the conversation. Let us know if you've had any light bulb moments in the comments below. And we look forward to seeing you again next week. Cheers.
cheers, guys.